And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. It's a Monday morning. Things have been happening on the Dualistic Unity side. As I mentioned in the previous episode, we are currently looking for an advertising sales agent. This is a commission-only job. What we are really looking for is someone who sees the vision of Dualistic Unity, who would like to help us in terms of just volunteering some time at first, possibly, unless you are not working at the moment and you have a lot of extra time, in which case you can volunteer as much time as you'd like, but you can set your own hours. And all you would have to do is basically seek out advertisers that could buy up ad space on our podcast. And if this is something that interests you, then do check out the job posting on LinkedIn that we've shared, as well as on Discord, or you can just reach out to us and ask us about it. This is definitely something it's only commission at the moment. There is no salary that goes with this because, again, as Andrew and I and Amanda have just worked countless hours for free over the last year and a half, we see the vision. We understand what's possible with this. And so if you share that, do reach out to us because we would love to talk to you about it. That said, we are actually live streaming on LinkedIn today for the very first time, which is fantastic. I think that's great, especially given that we have been looking for somebody for this position on LinkedIn for the last few days. I do want to talk about something quickly. Well, I've got a few things to talk about quickly. One is the need to self-validate, but the other thing is this job position that we posted. I just want to share this with you because I find it really funny. It goes to show how the amount of attention that we put into things, even in the smallest ways, in the slightest little details, really does make a difference as to the outcome and the end result, or even how people respond to us. And what I mean is that we posted this job for an advertising sales agent. Like I said, it's commission only. We're aware it's commission only. We've even said on the job posting, I think a number of times, this is commission only because we don't want to catch anybody off guard. And we had a number of people apply. One of those people had a great resume, great-ish, enough experience to warrant getting back to them. And they write to me and they go, "Hey, that's great. I'd love to set up an appointment. But I just want to make sure that this job has a base salary of $55,000 a year." To which I wrote back, it clearly states on the job posting that this is commission only. And I didn't say anything other than that. I left it at that. But my thought was, and I just wonder if this dawns on you as well, that this individual asked for $55,000 per year plus commission, because commission was part of the job, and couldn't prove his ability to read the job posting correctly. So please pay me $55,000 a year so I can pay the same amount of stunning attention to the job that you're giving me as I did to the posting about the job that I didn't read. And that doesn't dawn on people. I just thought it was really entertaining. I think that's been my favorite one so far. That and the person who just couldn't figure out whether or not to book another day since today didn't work out.
Yeah, it's a nice little filter we got there. Are you adept enough to read the entire job description and understand what we're talking about? Because if you can't do that, odds are you're not going to do a great job with this. So it's an easy initial filter right there. So I'm glad we have that. But it's funny how people don't pay close attention to things like that. And I think a big part of that is just the immediate ideas we hold on to, like the both expectations, ideas, things that we hold on to inside of our mind that distract us from what we're actually looking at. And so this is something I was kind of thinking about this morning, just how people are running around saying like maybe this, maybe that, maybe all of these things. And when it comes to ideas, especially ideas of people, like, of course, your idea of them is never the reality of them. It's one of the most obvious things you can ever realize, and yet we don't. And yet we hold on to and maintain this maybe my idea of them is actually them. Maybe my idea of the situation of what's happening is actually definitely what's happening. It never, ever, ever, ever is. Your idea of a person is never going to be them, ever, because they're not an idea. That's all it is. It's so when you break it down to like reality versus ideas, it's so obvious. It's like, of course you can never maintain an idea that is actually them. But we think that we can get close and we think we can actually come to some conclusion that is, but it's always going to be a conceptual idea. And people aren't ideas. And yet they kind of are. Like, the reality of them isn't, but the way we interact is, because in order to maintain a conceptual feeling, a perception of division, an idea of other things outside of you, it has to be a concept. It has to be an idea. And so we settle upon that, and it's never going to be it. Like, it can't possibly be it. It is impossible to be so. And I was just thinking about how often people will come up with things like maybes. Like, oh, no one knows anything. And maybe this is the case. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. Maybe their belief makes sense. Maybe their belief makes sense. It's like, it only exists in their head. It doesn't exist in reality. Your idea of me, your idea of Ray, your idea of yourself, your idea of another person, your idea of your parents, your idea of your friends aren't them. They're just not, straight up. It's not like kind of them, a little bit them. It's not. It's just not at all. And it's can be uncomfortable to realize that, but I don't know. I've just been hearing more and more like, oh, well, maybe this is happening. Maybe this is what's happening. Maybe this means this about me. Maybe that person is the idea of them that I hold on to. It's never it. It's not even a little bit it. It's not even a tiny bit it. It's not even a sliver of what they are. Like, it just isn't at all. And I understand, the reasoning for maintaining some false certainty, but at the same time, I was going to say it does us some good to maintain it, but it doesn't at all. Like, it takes us away from the reality of what's happening. It causes us this distortion. Expectations come with the ideas, and an expectation for them to live up to the idea or act in the way that is that, but it's never it. Like, it's never even a smidge it. And so I don't know. I just find it funny how people will continue to just say like the word maybe, like maybe this, maybe that. And it's like, it's not. It's not to say that I know what it is, but it's just a continual process of finding out, what, the answer to life is, the person that you're interacting with. It's like, you can't know them. Your idea is never going to be them. So you just have to pay attention to what they're doing here and now, what they're saying, the interaction that you're having with them to get even a tiny bit close to what they are. But it's never the idea. The whole maybe shtick is fucked. It's never it.
Yeah. It's funny because you start to get frustrated with it when you start recognizing it in yourself. You're like, oh God, why did I do so much of that? And then you start recognizing it in other people. And what's funny is the only thing that's changed is that you're recognizing it. I mean, people have been doing this your entire life. Everybody's been doing this in their entire life. That's the funny part about all this is, we wake up and we go, ah. It's like, well, yeah, but you were doing it too, right? Now you're coming to a different point in your life. But the frustration is the tricky part. The frustration with people, the frustration in general, like, Buddy asking for the 55K, that kind of thing. Why should it be frustrating? It should be entertaining at the end of the day. For me, it's frustrating for them, right? Like, when people are assuming things and people want to come up with some conclusion before the fact, I mean, that leads to frustration. Expectation and frustration go hand in hand. I don't have to get upset about it. It doesn't have to bother me so long as I remember where it's coming from and remember not to have expectations of them, which leads me to self-validation. We really want people to let us know we're important to them. We really want people to say, you like me, right? We're okay, right? Dude, let me know that if I'm bothering you. Am I awkward? Am I annoying? Any of these things. And basically, we like looking for a status update, or we hang out with people who like looking for a status update. And the problem is when we do that, we don't recognize that while we're trying to pull people closer to us, we're actually pushing them farther away. And it's largely because nobody wants to be in a position where they're always having to reinforce you. Right. And so it's really interesting. And this is something, again, I go through in terms of like my teenage daughter right now. She's going through the ups and downs of friendship. And as a teenager, friendship is very different because there's a lot of emotions involved. There's a lot of change involved. And you really have to recognize that to have a good friend is to be a good friend. And to be a good friend is to not try to be a friend at all, but to have integrity, to be yourself. And that's really tricky when you want to be liked. And so what you do is you go through this cycle of wanting to be liked, of wanting to be the person that you think people are going to like, and trying to keep people around that way. And you can never do that because people change all the time, right? Not only that, but the real kick in the ass is when people do like you as you're doing that. And then at some point it dawns on you, they don't really like you because you were never being yourself. So what they like is this carefully orchestrated play. And how long can you continue that? And do you even enjoy doing that? And so it's really just important to recognize that if you want to be good company, don't ask if you're good company. Right? If you want people to enjoy your presence, don't ask them to reinforce your presence. Don't ask them to define your presence, to describe your presence, validate your presence. Just be there. Just be there and let it play out. If they don't want to talk to you after the fact, they don't want to talk to you after the fact. Sometimes we don't all get along. And that's okay. It doesn't diminish your value. It just means that this may not be the environment that you're aligning with at the moment. Right? Maybe there's something to learn there. But it has nothing to do with whether or not you are valuable as to whether or not people like you. Right? There's going to be a lot of people who don't like you, and it has nothing to do with your value. Nothing.
Yeah, real quick, and this will tie into that part. I'm realizing after that little semi-frustrated rant that it was my own expectations that people aren't gonna say maybe, that or use that maybe. Oh, maybe this, maybe that. Exactly. Fuck, I can't stand on anything. I can't hold on to anything. Oh god. But yeah, as you started talking, I was like, oh yeah, fuck, that was kind of my own expectations. That's where my frustration comes from, expecting them to not have any idea, and my expectation for them to realize that any idea they hold on to isn't it, and to not say things like, well, maybe that. And it's like, yeah, you can recognize it never is, but like at the same time, it comes down to my experience and my own expectation of someone else to not realize that. And so when you're going through that, and so what you finished off there with having checking in with people and maintaining an idea, like it's a real kick in the nuts to realize that if you're maintaining an idea of yourself and trying to be something for someone else, and someone likes that, they don't like you. Like and you're doing that to yourself, it's like, it's really like you're kicking yourself in the nuts by trying to be something and getting them to like that thing. Like their response to you being yourself and them liking or disliking you is kind of irrelevant to you and your reality. But if you're trying to be something, it's like the reality of you being yourself, just like what you are, when you're not trying to be anything at all. If they don't like something about you, it's coming from their own experience, and it's not something you have to be concerned about. And I get why we do get concerned about that, because we want the validation. We want to confirm that we're doing something correctly, or we're acting in a way that's affirmed by the whole, or affirmed by other people, that like, I'm doing the right thing, I'm acting in the right way. And so when you need that because you don't see it in yourself, you check in with people. You're like, how am I doing? Can you tell me how I'm doing? Do you like me? And it's like 10 minutes later, do you still like me? It's like, I don't like people who check in with me. So now I don't really. Like, stop fucking checking in. Like, the need and where that comes from, it's so interesting how we tend to gravitate towards people who are authentically themselves. And if we don't, it's like there's lots of people out there. Why do you need everyone to like you? Like, everyone's so different in their own preferences. So you trying to curate yourself into this thing that someone else is going to like is just like bashing your head against the wall over and over and over because they're doing their thing. Odds are they're probably not thinking about you very much. And you're thinking about them in a specific way that isn't them, going back to your idea of them is never going to be them, and then trying to get that idea to like you. It's like you're trying to do something that you can't do. It's like trying to drink air or something. It's like you can breathe air, but you can't really drink it. It's not something that's possible. And so trying to get someone else to like an idea of you, like if you recognize their own preferences and try and be that, it's just going to make your life so much more difficult. And so you keep trying to be something, you keep investing in being this thing that isn't yourself, taking all of this effort to do so, and you still have the same chance as being yourself as whether or not they're going to like you. So you're doing the same sort of thing and you have no idea what's going on with them and their preferences and their ideas. You're just maintaining an idea of them that also isn't them, trying to meet that thing that you're maintaining of them and that idea's expectations, but you're maintaining that idea of them. So really, it's just your own expectations of yourself. You're trying to get yourself to like you because it's always that reflection. So that's all we're trying to do. And so it always comes back to you and your own experience. And if you're good with you, if you're being yourself, not trying to be anything at all, you don't need the external validation. You don't need it from other people. But as you stick your arm out, as you try and be something, you're flipping a coin. Are they going to like me? Or are they not going to like me? And it's a equal risk, and you're taking all of this effort to be something. So is it even worth it to try and be that and then get someone to like you? Because there's going to be someone else you're trying to get to like you that has totally different preferences and ideas. And and so they're not going to align anyway. So you're trying to be this little curated idea that's liked by everyone that can't be liked by everyone because everyone's doing their own thing and doing their own stuff. And so it's just so goddamn pointless because eventually either you keep doing it and you're fucking miserable, or you stop doing it and be something else, and then a whole different group of people are going to like you and dislike you and everything shifts and changes, but at least you're free, so it's kind of irrelevant. But as you're trying to be something, as you're checking in, like, oh, do you still like me? Am I still doing okay? It's like it just doesn't make sense when you break it down, but at the same time I understand why we do it, but it really just comes back to ourself and our perspective of ourself and our own idea we're maintaining inside of our mind and whether or not we feel like that's adequate.
Okay. So there's another, quote unquote, kick in the nuts. And as some of the people in our chat section asked, if they don't have nuts, what is it a kick in? Whatever hurts most. It's a kick in whatever hurts most. The tender bits is what I'm saying. It is the fact that we can say all this stuff. Like we talk about this and we talk about like, okay, well, investing in this way or investing in this strategy or this perception of yourself or investing in this way of engaging in a relationship has this consequence, it'll do this, it gets you all twisted up, you end up losing sight of yourself, so on and so forth. And we talk about this all the time. And unfortunately, what ends up coming across sometimes is, oh, well, shit, I got to make sure I don't do any of that. That is definitely not the point. At all. It's not a list of what to do and what not to do. It's not a list of beware, this will ruin you. It's just they're just considerations. They're just considerations. And so what I mean is that, using maybe sometimes is okay. It really depends on where it's coming from. It's always okay, but how much consequence does it have? So really, it's like, who's it okay to? Who is it not okay to? Really comes down to the experiencer, right? Like, and all that. And so the same is true for everything else, including asking for validation. If you have asked for validation, if you're looking for validation right now, That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, except that you're going to want more. That's all. It's that whatever you feed, you're going to get used to, and the familiar becomes addictive. And validation is really, really addictive. Looking for that status update, that progress report from people, just so you can know how you're doing and you're not left with the decision from your own perspective of how you're doing. Because that really is it. Right? Like if you're being dictated by the world, you're always at the whim of your assumptions, and you're always at the whim of fickle people, which is really important to remember, because here we are worried about being liked or disliked. But what kind of person immediately likes or dislikes you based off something superficial or something that just happened once? A dick. So the person, this fictitious person that we're worried about liking us or disliking us, is a dick, because anybody who is reasonable wouldn't jump at an assumption that quickly. They would think, well, this person might be having a bad day. They would cut us some fucking slack, is what I'm saying. So it's not just about whether you're liked or disliked. Who are you catering to? Who is this person in your head who has such a high standard that you have to live up to? Because that person sounds like somebody you don't want to hang with. And yet they're following you around in your head because you're creating them, because you're afraid of them, because they're you. That's why they're so scary. You can't run from it. All you can do is look at it and go, fuck, I need to like myself. And that's not even true. You just have to be yourself. And you're going to have moments where you're a fan of that. And you're going to have moments where you're kind of shitting all over that. Like, God, I'm such a dick. And that's okay. There is nothing wrong with doing any of that. Just be yourself. Recognize it's going to go up and down. Don't take it too seriously. Don't take it too personally. Don't hold on to it, because that's the shit that drags you down and makes it harder for you to respond in a way that you will like, that you will feel good about, because it's you, rather than the you that's hiding, or the you that's afraid, or the you that's needy, or the you that needs control. These are all the versions of you that you don't enjoy. And that's why you're asking other people around you, after you exercise those parts, whether or not they still like you. The question is whether or not you still like you.
Oh man. Okay. So it just hit me as you were talking. Like, I don't really maintain ideas of people in the sense of saying, I'll say something like, oh, I like that person, sort of, but I never really, I don't really say much anymore. I don't like that person, because I know if I do, I catch myself very quick. And it's like, my idea of them isn't them. Any of the shit I'm basing that opinion off of is just a very tiny little sliver of the overarching reality of what they are. So even when if someone were to ask me, like, oh, do you like me? Like, I mean, I'm hanging with you. Like, the whole liking, disliking thing starts to break down. It starts to not make any sense. And so when we fear someone maintaining like what their opinion of us is, it's like we will trade an opinion for no opinion. We'll trade any opinion for none. Like, because we want to know we're being thought about, in a sense, and it's because we're maintaining an idea of ourself. But if someone were to ask me that, I'd almost like scratch my head and be like, I'm talking to you right now. Why are you concerned about my opinion of you? Like, we can have a conversation, we can hang out. Like, what is this gobbledygook bullshit about my opinion of you? Why do you think I need to settle upon anything? Like, what is that? Like, where does that and I know it comes from like desire for certainty and like that validation. And but I was thinking about it, I'm like, fuck, I don't really have hard and fast opinions of like, oh, I hate that person. I don't like him. Like, even just for example, because we harp on Andrew Tate for a while, it's like with him, I don't I don't know the dude. I've just seen some shit that he's done, and it's like recognition of behavior is all it is. It doesn't mean anything about him, despite us like, you know, recognizing certain things and certain very, very egotistical behaviors. Like, I don't dislike him. I don't hate Andrew Tate. I don't hate anyone because that's settling upon an assumption that I know them, that their idea of them is the reality of them. And if I'm recognizing that my idea of myself isn't the reality of me, my idea of other people isn't the reality of them, you can't hate or even love in the conceptual hallmark bullshit idea of love because you realize you're just loving an idea. You're loving an idea that you're maintaining that also isn't them. So you're not really loving them. You're loving your idea of them. You're not really hating them. You're hating their idea, your idea of them. And so even now I'm realizing like because I will still get concerned about judgment and shit, and it comes up here and there. And I'm realizing like anyone, as you were saying, like anyone who maintains that, do you really want to spend any time and energy being concerned about their opinion? Because there's someone who's maintaining hard and fast opinions of them. They're buying into bullshit. And it's not to say there's anything wrong with that, but I know when I do that, if I say something like, oh, I don't like that person, I'm kind of like, well, I mean, yeah, but not really. Like, I know it's just my little sliver of an idea based on interactions that I've had with them. And you go through enough interactions with someone, and you're like, all right, I got enough proof now. There's a lot of people out there. I don't want to spend as much time with them, but it's not a hate thing. It's a recognition of my experience. And then I can hear people saying, well, oh, you recognize yourself in them. Why are you avoiding them? You're just avoiding yourself. It's like, that's going back to what we were talking about yesterday with the rules, the guidelines to recognizing yourself in other people. It's like, just because you do that doesn't mean you have to interact with everyone. You can't interact with everyone all the time. Even the people you don't know, you're technically avoiding them. You're not hanging out with them because you're not with them right now. And so it's funny because it's like anyone who holds on to that, I hate this person, I don't like this person, is just settling upon an assumption of what they are. And it's not actually you. They're never actually hating you. They're never actually judging, having this strongly held judgment of you or disliking you. And so when you check in, you're like, oh, do you still like me? It's like, I don't even know what you're asking right now. Do I still like my idea of you that I'm holding on to? Like, I'm with you right now. You're asking me if I like an illusion, an idea of you. It's like, stop fucking asking. It's getting kind of annoying, and I'm going to stop hanging out with you if you keep doing so. And you're cutting down on the time that we could be spending interacting with each other and growing a relationship. But you're too caught in bullshit self validation, trying to feel better about wondering if I'm thinking about you. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't like that. It has nothing to do with you. Just not a fan of that. The validation thing. If we could stop that, that'd be great. But it has nothing to do with your value to me, right? But this is where we're knocking on the door of what love really is, right? And we've talked about this before. Acceptance without precondition. Love is what's always happening when we're not getting in the way with our ego, trying to decide whether we like or dislike people, right? Because what are we doing every time we have an idea of somebody that we can hate? We're avoiding or even ignoring the fact that that person exists just like we do, that they started out as the same blank slate we did as a baby, and they went through twists and turns and met people and had experiences that eventually twisted them or brought them to be the person that you've decided you hate. And all you're hating is a collection of actions. All you're hating is a collection of perceptions about themselves and the world. That's all you're hating. You're not actually hating the person. You're just hating the part of their awareness that they're lost in and attached to and stuck to. Right? And so what good does it do to hate a part of our awareness? Nothing. And it certainly doesn't help us get out of those parts of our awareness or understand them. And so that's where love really is in the recognition that you can never know enough about that person's experience to have an opinion that matters at all.
And that is a kick in the nuts or a kick in the private parts or sensitive areas of your body. And holy shit. Yeah, it is that. Like, you can't, but we try. we really we really want to, and oh man, like even just that, like that shifts everything if you can recognize, like really, really recognize that. Because any of the concern, like you start to realize how it's all just coming from you. Like any concerns, any worries, any fears is just you fearing yourself, and oh gosh, and just buying it. It's the investment in the idea of other people that comes with the consequences, like just the desire for there to be someone else, for there to be anyone else, comes with all of these potential risks and costs. And so I know we've been talking about like self-soothing, self-validating, but I was curious because you've used this term a lot and I use it sometimes, but I'm curious like what your kind of definition of self-validation is. From my understanding, it's reinforcing, like using things, other people, situations, whatever, opinions to reinforce my idea of myself, basically, because I want to maintain it. But I'm curious what your, I don't know, kind of definition of it is.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Validating the illusion. It's not just using other people, but it's also using whatever it is that you say. You can use any action you want and validate yourself. And what I mean is that if you have a perspective, and it's not always positive. I think that's the most important thing. When we're talking about self validation, we're not always talking about positive self validation. This isn't validation that you're awesome, it's validation that what you think you are is what you are. Right, which is the danger. And so like if you have a negative perspective of yourself, for example, and you go out, you go for a walk, something happens where by no fault of your own, out of your control, something happens that you don't like or that you don't appreciate or you don't feel should be happening, and all of a sudden it comes down to your story. You use that as part of reinforcing your story. You're like, of course, because this and this and this, because of this part of my life, because of where I've come from, because of the astrology, because of all this stuff, and it just becomes validating to the narrative that you want to hold on to. And that's what we're doing all the time. Like as soon as you have an idea of yourself, you must validate it. You must continue to say, yep, that's the truth, because otherwise it's always in danger. It can be torn apart. And so that's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and we do it all the time. It's not just in asking whether people like us, it's in telling ourselves people like us, right? Or in going out and buying certain things based on what we think other people will like. All of this stuff just feeds the narrative, and it avoids the reality that you don't fucking know, and your value is immeasurable. Right? But all you're doing is reinforcing the story, and it's exhausting. We don't recognize how much goes into it because we're doing it all the time. We've been doing it for years and years, sometimes decades. Doing it so much, we don't even recognize that we can stop or that there's something else. This is why people have problems sitting still. They're always trying to maintain the structure of who they think they are. Because you can look at it that way. You can look at it as a tower that's always being built upon because it's never enough, right? It's never tall enough. It's never big enough, right? It's never got enough shit in it. So you always got to build it up. Well, the more you build it up, the more it starts to fall apart because you can't maintain everything all the time. I mean, look at the United States and their infrastructure, right? It's a perfect example of a crumbling ego.
Yeah, and oh man, as you were talking, I'm realizing just how many things we do to do it. Like it really can be a constant, like an all day, every day sort of thing, judging the things that you do all the time. Like, did I, you know, uh, waking up? No, I snoozed my alarm, and then I got up after that. It's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I wish I hadn't. And then we get caught in that sort of loop, and then it's, oh, we're getting dressed for going somewhere, and we keep going through all these different outfits, and we're like, oh, how is this gonna look? It's like everything, so many of the things, almost everything a lot of people do in our society is self-validation, is just reinforcing that. And it's like all of our opinions are that. Any opinion we hold on to is that self-validation. Like, I have this opinion. This is my opinion. This is the way I think about this. This is how I feel. Oh, I can't do that because I'm this type of person. Like, it's a constant. It's like the egotistical constant is self-validation, thinking about ourselves, talking about ourselves, judging ourselves, measuring ourselves relative to other people, even scrolling on social media. Oh, I wish I had their life. I don't have their life. I wish I did. Oh, that they seem so happy, so much happier than me. And it's like the relativity and self-validation go hand in hand, because without the relativity, it would be very, very difficult. It would be impossible to measure anything, measure yourself relative to something else. And I guess that's, I don't know, that's kind of how I'm seeing it too, is it's just a constant measurement relative to expectation, relative to what you should be doing, like what you're doing relative to what you should be doing, what you're feeling relative to what you should be feeling, what you're the situation that you're in, the job that you have relative to the job that you should have, the amount of money that you're making relative to the amount of money you should be making. Like it's all this idea of where I should be. Oh, I'm not where I should be. I should be here. And it's all a maintenance, a constant reinforcing of me being this thing that exists separate from everything else. And it's a constant reinforcement of my idea of myself as truth. And it just keeps getting built upon, but it's never it. Like it's a as the building keeps getting built, it keeps crumbling because it's not really there. Like it is, of course, the experience of it is, but at any given moment we can stop looking at it. Like we can realize, oh, that's a building that's actually not me. Like it's got our name on it or whatever. It's like, oh, there's a lot that's been invested in. I've been spending my entire life from, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, starting at the base of it, starting to build this idea. And it's just like playing a game. It's like playing a game and then looking around. It's like the that video I made last year with the sandcastles. Like everyone's building a sandcastle. We see everyone else with their sandcastle, and then we start defending our sandcastle. We keep trying to build it bigger and bigger. The waves keep coming in, taking out chunks of the sandcastle. Like things keep happening, and we're maintaining it as if it means something about us. Like all of my value is derived from how people see my sandcastle, how people look at my sandcastle, what people think of my sandcastle, and their thoughts about my sandcastle are just validation of their own sandcastle. Their perception of my sandcastle is in comparison to theirs. And those who stop paying so much attention to their own sandcastle can actually appreciate, some of the other sandcastles, but it's like they're not even looking at the sandcastles. They're looking at the person building it, interacting with them, actually interacting with reality itself, as opposed to just pointing from their sandcastle at other sandcastles. And that's what we do with judgment. It's just sitting in our sandcastle, pointing at someone else's, oh, look at their shitty sandcastle, just in comparison to their own. Oh man, look at how big and nice their sandcastle looks. It's so much bigger and nicer than mine. And it's not them though. But that's the equivalency we draw when we draw it about ourselves. Because if we think our sandcastle means something about us, everyone else's must mean something about them. If we recognize that it doesn't, then we can recognize that theirs doesn't mean anything about them. And so going back to what I said before, when someone will ask me like, oh, do you have an idea of me? Or maybe I was talking about that before the call. Like if someone were to ask me if I had an idea of them or maintain ideas, and I was talking before just about how I don't really maintain ideas. It's like someone asking, have you ever thought about my sandcastle? Or what's your opinion on my sandcastle? Did you have one before you met me, before you interacted with me? It's like, no, I didn't, because I'm not looking at your sandcastles, because I'm not attaching as much. I obviously still do, but like recognizing more and more that my sandcastle doesn't mean anything about me. My sandcastle is fucking bullshit. But there's still a lot, and that's the part that I've realized the last couple of weeks, is like there's still a lot that's been invested in that sandcastle, and that's impacting everything that I do and say and act. But the chipping away at it isn't this process based thing that we want, like this journey. It's just a recognition here and now in each and every moment. And so it's interesting how we are living in a world looking at sandcastles or buildings or whatever it may be, thinking that it means something inherent about us. And it doesn't. And it's fucking exhausting to keep building that when we can just run around and play in the sand and not sit in our sandcastle defending it from everyone else and all of the elements and everything going on and the frustration. Oh, the rain's coming. It's chipping away at my sandcastle. When you realize it doesn't mean anything about you, you let it wash away. You're like, oh, I can be free. Basically, the sandcastle is a prison. You think you have to stay within the walls and maintain it and defend it, hold on to it, and that's the cost of maintaining that, is that you're stuck in it. You're stuck in that conceptual idea, forced to judge everyone else's sandcastle because that's how you see yourself.
In a world where sandcastles are valued more than anything else, it's not even just about your sandcastle, because people who have decided that their sandcastles will never be enough will go and build their sandcastles close to somebody else's giant sandcastle, and they'll tell them how awesome their sandcastle is. And this is why celebrities have it so fucking bad. Like, I feel so sorry for so many celebrities who work so hard under this idea, like, yeah, sandcastle, got to be the best sandcastle. I'm going to be in front of everybody with my sandcastle. And then everybody else just like all of a sudden, like, yes, you're the best sandcastle. And they invest in this and they think that this actually adds to their value. And then all of a sudden they realize it never did. And they did all of that for nothing. And now they're surrounded by fucking sycophantic assholes, right? People who just want to suck up to them for the sake of having value by association, right? Like, well, I'm close to your sandcastle, therefore my sandcastle's better, right? And we do that shit all the time. And it's just because we have this investment in the idea of the people rather than the person itself, which is why celebrities end up having that crash where they have to come out the other side and go, I had to realize I don't give a fuck about anybody, about what anybody thinks of me at all. Right? That's that gap. But then the problem is that they stop giving a fuck what anybody thinks about them, but they still give a fuck what they think about them. So the journey doesn't necessarily continue. It's just continuing. It just stops long enough for the major suffering to end. This is the thing, is that there's so much to what we're talking about in terms of this ongoing realization. We were saying this in Patreon the other day, like, it starts to settle in that you're never what you think you are. And then you start to realize how many relationships that you've built based on what people think of you or what you want people to think of you, how many things you've done based on how you want to be perceived, how many things you've done based on how you don't want to be perceived, how you've orchestrated your entire life around this fictional character that has ultimately just led you to feel tired and still inadequate. And so you come to realize that, and then eventually other people as a consideration starts to disappear, and you start to realize you've been doing all of that for your own sake, that actually you've been putting on all of this act for your own sake, using people as kind of the excuse, right? But it's always been your own fears and doubts and thoughts you've been dealing with, not other people's. And then that deepens, right? And it's always deepening, it's always changing, but it's really important to recognize that, that the way you think right now is as insightful as you might be, is going to change into something else. But how often do we just try to get to a point where we're like, okay, I feel better, and then stop?
All the fucking time. Like, because, and anytime we settle, it's like we're immediately at conflict with reality, right? And it's that urge is there. It's interesting though, because like settling isn't, it's not like running is being, let go of ideas, being in reality, and then sitting down is settling upon an idea. So it gives you like a rest. It's not like that. It's like the rest is being aligned with reality. The exhausting part is trying to maintain it, right? Like, yeah, because even
Exactly.
in that, yeah,
That's why we're always saying relax. That is the reason that all of this comes down to relax and surrender, is because we're the ones doing the effort that's causing our suffering.
yeah, it's like, uh, It's more like we're on a it's like we're on a moving walkway, is being in reality, hanging out, continuing to move through it, letting go. And then when we try and stop on an answer, on an idea, it's like we have to run backwards to stay in the same spot on the moving walkway. So it's so much more effort and energy. There's people coming up behind us. We can't see them because we're not paying attention. So we're trying to stay in this spot because, like, the moving walkway is moving across, and we're on it when we're chilling, being relaxed and hanging out. And then, but if I want to stay in this spot and it's moving, I have to. It's kind of the other way, but I have to keep moving backwards and doing all this effort in order to stay in this spot, as opposed to just continuing to let go and move on and move through and be reality itself. Like, being on the moving walkway is being reality, aligned with it. You don't have to do anything.
The
And
flow.
exactly, because you're it. Yeah. You are it. You are the river. You're not in the river. You're not on the moving walkway. You are the moving walkway. Thinking that it's not getting caught in shit because you find that it's more comfortable because you don't know where the walkway is going ever. You never really do, but it's either that, continuing on, or continuing on with more resistance and effort, because, like, you're still moving forward as you're going backwards. You're not going faster in the opposite direction than the moving walkway, but we stop when we settle upon conceptual ideas. When we maintain an idea, it's like, oh, well, maybe I'm this, maybe I'm that, like we were saying before, maybe this, maybe that. It's not that, though. It's continue finding out what you are, what you're capable of. And as you're moving, like, obviously that's a simplistic example, but there's things that come up that you go through. There's different experiences that are had. The scenery keeps changing and shifting. But as you try and settle, it's like you move your attention into your mind and your thoughts and your ideas. And so it remains in that spot. The scenery stays the same because the scenery isn't reality. It's conceptual ideas that you're holding on to inside of your mind that you're doing everything to maintain, whether it's positive or negative. You're trying to curate a reality that continues to change and move to maintain the comfort, the false comfort, false certainty that comes from maintaining the idea, because you keep just looking at the same thing over and over and over, as opposed to continuing to allow things to continue on and just keep moving through it and keep being it. It's like anything in nature, a river, a tree growing, like, it's fucking growing. Whether its idea of how it should look, it's going to look how it looks, no matter what its idea of how it should look, how big it is, how short it is, how tall it is. And so many of the things in society that we do, like looking a certain way, acting a certain way, stems from the idea that we should be different than we are. Like, even with something like obesity, like, I get that some people have larger fat cells than others. I'm not saying that there isn't a genetic component to that. But at the same time, a lot of times people, you know, go through things like that and gain a ton of weight is because there's stress from thinking that they should be something other than what they are. And so they're stagnating in this spot, maintaining ideas of shoulds and shouldn'ts and right ways to be and wrong ways to be. And I'm not saying this is always the case, but oftentimes when that starts to happen, it's the maintenance of certain ideas. And that's why, like obesity in the way we have it right now wasn't really a thing like hundreds of years ago. Like, it wasn't nearly in the same way, especially in the US, especially in middle America. It's and it stems from just, I don't know, existing. So much of it stems from existing in your mind, and the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and the stressors that comes with that. Maintaining those things, as opposed to just continuing to find out and being willing to let go of those ideas, those false certainties.
It's really interesting when you think about the let's just say the motivators for the ego, right? And this is something in Power versus Force they were kind of describing as fields within our awareness. That there's a certain draw to egotistical thoughts, and then there's a certain draw away from egotistical thoughts. And it really just comes down to which direction you're going, or rather which mentality you're aligned with. And what we don't recognize is that it takes a great deal of strength and awareness and clarity to not get caught up in desire, to not give in to fear, to pull yourself out of anger, right? It takes a lot of energy. And what you just described could also be described in terms of maintaining an idea of yourself is always from the past. You're always looking backwards. Regardless of what your idea is, it's based on what you've done. It's not based on what you're doing. Because you'll notice when you're doing, you're not thinking. You're thinking after the doing, even microseconds after the doing. And it's the reason that you fuck things up when you're trying to pay attention to like having steady hands or something, and then you think about it, right? It's because now you're not doing, you're thinking about the doing. So it's always of the past. It's always in terms of who you used to be, who you think you used to be, how you perceive you used to be, any of those things. And so basically what we're saying is that it's the equivalent of trying to swim upstream. Like you're trying to stay in place while the flow is trying to pull you down the river, which you would normally do, but you're afraid of what's down the river. And so here we are just chugging away, swimming upstream, powering through it. And then all of a sudden the flow increases, right? And that's what happens when there's a lot of change in our life. And when what happens, we get all stressed out and resistant. Well, why? Well, because we have to swim harder now. So now we have to validate more, right? That's all we're talking about when we're talking about self-validation, is pumping harder against the river, right? And because of all of the energy and all of the attention and all of the investment it takes to do that, we have no attention left to pass up that addiction. We have no attention left to put into our relationships. We have no attention left to put into our life. We're too busy trying to maintain the past. And in doing so, we're missing the flow. And that's all we're ever talking about on here is, you don't have to resist the river because it's you. Just relax into what you are. You are change. It's happening for you. It's happening as you. It's just that we have lost such sight of that we actually have to think, no. I got to be in there telling myself what the best change is for me. It's like, you don't even know. That's the whole point of growth. Like if you knew how to build a car before you knew how to put a nut and bolt together, it'd be a totally different journey. But you have to start from the bottom and build on what you've learned. That's the whole point. You are where you are, and that's going to turn into something else right now. You don't have to know what that thing is.
Yeah, and we'll hold on to this idea that we should know how to do something. Like even in that example, we can hold on to this idea because other people know how to do it, or we feel embarrassed if we don't know how to, just take that example, build a car. And yet we don't know anything that goes into that. So we jump ahead thinking I should be good at this. Oh, I should be better than I am. It's like you are the amount of goodness that you are on that thing right now. Your idea of where you should be is fucking irrelevant to that. Your idea of how well you should be able to build a car is irrelevant to how well you can build a car. Like, and if you can't do some of the other things, like if you haven't gotten the reps in, if you haven't done the practice, if you haven't done the work, like what is this? The expectation isn't necessary. And it's not only not necessary, it's going to take so much energy to maintain it, thinking that you should. And then it's going to create frustration. It's going to, because it comes with massive expectations of something that is totally irrelevant. Like our idea of where we should be at in life is irrelevant to where we're at. And it doesn't help us get to where we think we should be at. It takes us away from that. It's like, as you said, pumping against the river. Like it really is that idea of where we think we should be is like going, like we're going where we're going and we don't know where that is. We don't know what's going to happen. And it's funny how in our society, like we'll it's such a common thing to maintain goals and structures and like, oh, I'm setting this goal, therefore it's going to be more likely that I get there. But you don't even know, like, okay, you could get there, but you don't know if there's somewhere else that you could have gotten if you didn't maintain all of that attention in the goal. Like in the false certainty that you gained from holding on to certain goals. Like you don't need goals. You can just keep because think about it, like if you maintain a goal and then you do all these things to reach that goal, you can still do all the things without maintaining the goal, and then there's more energy for the things. But it's that relaxation into uncertainty. Like, you are the river. The river's flowing, it's going somewhere. You don't know where it's going, but it's going somewhere. And you put things in to have influence over the river, but it's influence here and now. It's not any indication of where that river is going. And so I'm trying to think with this example of like the river, the difference between influencing and control. It's, I guess, I don't know, would you say with influence you can impact the speed of the river? Like, the more energy you put in, the more energy is in the river because you are the river. Because, with free will, we have the option to do things or not do things. And I'm trying to think
No,
because even
I
not,
see where you're going with that. Okay, so
yeah.
hold on. Let's see if I can expand where we're going with the river thing. So we always, when we think of a river, we always think of a river that's complete, right? Where in this case, the river is in fact expanding itself all the time, forging ahead into the unknown, into new territory, right? Well, any water that's up high is going to find the most efficient way to go to lower land, right? So it's actually kind of an example of intelligence, right? And so the river is intelligence, and that intelligence has a big flow behind it. It has a lot of potential, but it can also, just like a river, kind of get dispersed. Now, like when a river all of a sudden hits like a big flat area, all of a sudden the flow dwindles to nothing, right? It becomes kind of like a swamp. And so, to answer your question as to what influence is, influence would be like all of a sudden we can bring all of that pressure down to a single point and blast through fucking rock. So all of a sudden, our intelligence can adapt to any environment. It's not just looking for the softest soil to go through. It's not just looking for, the easiest change to go to based on the pressure that we are ultimately embodying or allowing ourselves to use. It's like we're taking that entire river and funneling it down to a point.
Oh, yeah, very well said. And to just continue on with this, like, I think someone could try and take that and say, like, okay, well, if you can blast through a specific point, then you're saying you have control. And it's not that at all, because you still don't
We don't get to
know
choose the point,
exactly.
just the
You
pressure.
don't exactly, because you still don't know what's next. You still don't know what's to come. It's just how much of that force that always exists in potential is honed in to a specific point. And again, you don't know which point that is. You don't know what sort of resistance. You don't even know how big the rock is, but you have a higher likelihood of blasting through. And like, there's an inevitability to going somewhere with more pressure versus less. Like, if you have very, very little pressure, you're doing nothing, like sitting on your thumb all day in your living room doing nothing. It's very little pressure, and so it's still going to move, but it's not honed in. And so the more you put into things, it doesn't give you any degree of control whatsoever. It just ups that pressure, and you still don't know where it's going. You still have no idea. You still have no control, but it impacts because it's always sitting in that potential. And it's like a pool that's always there, and it's just how much is being used in this direction, because you're not taking from it, you're not separate from it, you're being it, doing it, being the pressure itself. And that's influence, but it's not control.
No, it's like we have the throttle on change, right? Like we're always resisting it instead of just untapping it. And that's what we're letting go of. We're just untapping what we are. Right now we're like swimming upstream and all the water's just kind of pooling in front of that unknown, right? It's not putting any pressure, it's all just potential. It's not until we get into the goddamn stream that it actually starts to punch through again. Right? And that's exactly what we are. We are momentum. We are change. Right? That's what it is. It's just that we resist it, and so we don't we don't know how to use it. We don't even feel the flow anymore.
Right. It's almost like by trying to maintain certain things, it's like we're pushing up against a dam almost. Like we're maintaining a dam, and letting go is like letting go of the dam, right? Like we bottle ourselves up, but even though we're doing that, there's still water leaking through. There's still water coming over the top, and there's
Can't stop
always going to
change.
be. Exactly. It's just how resistant are you to it, because you're like, I like the way things are now. And at first, there isn't a lot of buildup. Like you can hold up that wall pretty easily, and it's like stuff's just leaking through here and there. But then eventually it gets higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And we're still trying to maintain this. And when are you willing to let it go? When are you willing to let the inevitability of the pressure that's built up go? And that's like with Jim Carrey's thing on depression. Like depression is deep rest from the character you've been playing. Like you need a deep rest from that. And eventually we get to a point where it's like and this is like deep on the end of self-validation and negative idea of yourself, and all of that is like just holding up that idea of trying to be something. And then it gets to like a sink or a swim situation. And when you finally let go, you allow the river to carry you, and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. And that's like the rock bottom. And it's like you either bounce off or it sinks this iteration, but it's that, and it's the holding up of all of the pressure, as opposed to just continuing to allow. And it's not this one-time thing, it's like a constant thing. We're constantly putting up walls on the river, and then there's like a build, a build, a build, a build, a build. So like at first we don't even realize it. At first it's just a little creek that's barely got any pressure. But as we put that wall, as we settle upon that, and then over time it builds, it builds, it builds, and it comes to an inevitable point where we either let go or get crushed. We either continue to be it or we sink.
So we always have to be maintaining that wall. And that is self validation. Right? Because there's no conflict without I, there's no pressure without the wall. I am the wall. The idea of myself is the wall. It's what I'm holding everything back with. I've always got to be patching those holes because they keep springing up. Fuck. Right. And as Amanda was saying in the chat, I'm the dam or the wall that I feel trapped behind. And isn't that funny? Because, of course, you've erected the wall and now there's all that pressure, which seems terrifying as you look at it, not recognizing that you're a little puddle holding yourself off from being the entire fucking river. And that's the only reason you're afraid.
Damn. I liked where this analogy went. That was fun because it's always, and we've even referred to yourself. And I know Amanda, because Amanda's watching it at the first retreat, she referred to herself, idea of herself, as a wall, because that's what it is for everyone. It's always that. And it fits perfectly into the river analogy that we use so many times, like being the river. And yet we're so limitless, have so much potential of like experiencing everything. We can have the experience of holding ourselves off just from a perception. Like we're still the entirety of the river holding ourselves off, because that's how limitless we are. We can also we can actually keep ourselves at bay, the reality of what we are at bay, the change that continues to happen. It's like we can have influence over not stopping the change, but slowing it, fighting it, resisting it to a degree, which is still change in process, just with a lot more suffering, with a lot more resistance. And that's the wall. Like we're all putting up fucking walls thinking that it's doing something good, and people will build them really strong and big, and as opposed to just being willing to let it go.
Now, I would like you to envision this if you can. Okay. You have all of these rivers, hundreds, thousands of rivers, all coming out of the mountains, all flowing downstream, all coming to this plain where potentially you would have a forest and food and animals and life and everything that you need to sustain essentially paradise. But it requires all the rivers to flow in order for all of that to be. And we're all those rivers. And how many of us are stopping the flow? And then we wonder why the garden is so fucking untended. Right? It's because we are the flow that's required to change the environment. And we keep looking to the environment and going, we got to change that, while we're depriving it of the thing it needs in order to continue to change, which is us, change itself.
Oh man, exactly. Like we're it the whole time looking at things, wondering why it isn't fueled, why things are the way they are, wondering as we're like looking around, as we're like holding up these massive walls behind us, and things are just leaking through, looking at a potential paradise in front of us, wondering like, oh, it's not, why is the soil all dry? Why are the trees all dead? Why is this happening? Like scratching our heads, straight up wondering, despite having all of the fuel for all of that, like right behind us, if we can just let go. And we're looking at each other like, why is that the case? Well, I know why, because this shit's happening, because climate change, and because this country's doing this, and Canada's got their wildfires, and that's why it's we're all pointing at each other, and we all have like different colored shirts on, thinking that that means something, and judging them, and looking at each other's fucking walls, thinking that that is better. Like having a very sturdy wall, having a very strong wall, and that's what we're caught in. Like we're looking at each other's walls. That's the equivalency of the sandcastle, despite that being the thing that's holding up the flow. And we're all doing it to a degree, constantly. I'm doing it everywhere, all the time, to a degree, but it's not necessary. Like you can just let that shit go and find out, but there's no control. There's no certainty. You don't know where it's going to go, but it's going to go. At least it's going to go. At least it's going to start doing things. And then we're looking at everything, wondering how to fix everything. It's like, well, let's get some fucking fuel in there. Let's get some watering shit. The environment's there already. It just needs us to stop living in this conceptual prison.
Yeah. And this is the thing, when you look at what's happening in the world, when you look at the fact that war continues to happen, when you look at the economy and the fact that that seems to be more valuable than human life, when you look at, how corporations continue to push the envelope and break rules, and how governments continue to get more and more corrupt, when you look at all this stuff, and you think to yourself, it's just the fact that we're kind of dumb. Like that's really all it is we're so confused that we can't get past our own petty shit. That's the reason every structure we build ends up being corrupted, right? It doesn't matter how good the idea is. If you're going to run it with egotistical people, it's going to get corrupted, because they have needs that will come out on top of the structure itself. Whatever the structure was designed for is going to end up becoming self-serving, regardless if it's run by egotistical, needy people. And we forget that. We really do. We're like, oh, the structure's going to do it. No. We need to evolve. And by evolve, we don't even mean evolve. That's the worst thing. People are like, oh, we're going to become a new species, 5D. Ah. It's like, no, you're just going to stop being so involved in the stupid bullshit that's making you an idiot now. That's all it is, because you're already brilliant. You're just really distracted with stupid bullshit. That's all it is. And you're so distracted with the pressure of your bullshit, you don't realize that you can actually just let it go and you'll be fine. You don't realize it's an option. We don't realize it's an option. That's all it is. As soon as we stop being so distracting or distracted by money and fame and, what the Kardashians are wearing and what's on reality TV and the chance of becoming a fucking billionaire, or goddamn 2 billionaires fighting it out like assholes, like who gives a fuck? At the end of the day, like this is all just mindless fucking distraction. And for what? Because we don't know what else to do. We don't understand what else to do because we're too fucking confused to see anything clearly. And that's the only problem. That is the journey. That's what we're doing, and we can only do it for ourselves. You can't go out there and wake up other people, because to do so is an act of confusion.
Exactly. It really is with some of the shit going on. Like, starting to feel more and more like idiocracy. Like, we're looking at a reality that has the potential to be paradise for reality. Like, the earth itself is an incredible organism. It's just fucking insane. And we've gotten so caught in shit in this false certainty, like in just thinking that we can know what's going on and what we mean to other people or to ourselves, and thinking we know. Just the idea of certainty and buying into that illusion, buying into that, and because we do, we think we have to look at other people. Like, I have to change other people, because that's just another form of self-validation. Really, like, focusing on anyone else, thinking I know what's best for them. Oh, if they would just stop doing this. Even me before with my little shtick on, people saying, "Oh, well, maybe this idea, maybe their idea of them is still me thinking that I'm right, thinking that I'm correct." And there's a I think there's a balance certainly to be had between recognition of destructive behavior and thinking that it should be different. And I think that's what I'm just realizing more and more, is that it can be a recognition without a frustration. It can be a recognition with an acceptance of it being what it is, and and realizing that I still don't know. I still don't know how that'll play out, but you can see, like, that doesn't exist. That's an illusion. It's recognition as opposed to judgment is a thing. And with judgment, with thinking me versus them, me right, them wrong, comes the frustration, comes the impact to me, which is all stemming from a desire for self-validation myself.
And the idea that you were doing anything wrong when you were doing that. See, that's the funny part, right? Like, we come out of the maybes, or whatever it might be. We come out of the self-validation, and we're like, that caused so much damage for me. Why are all these people still doing this? And the only reason you have that response is because you're still so pissed off about the fact that you got caught up in it, or perhaps that you're still getting caught up in it. But when you let go of your judgment for yourself, you'll be more reasonable with everyone else, because there is nothing wrong with any of the steps that brought you here. Just don't get caught up in the step you're on.
Exactly. And that's always that's always it. Always it. Because if you're not, you're building a wall, even if it's just a small one with a bit of pressure, and then eventually, that builds up, and you let it go. But it's the constant. That's a component of tending to the garden, is not maintaining that wall or thinking that you need to, or it means something about you. But anyway, this has been a very fun
This
chat.
has been a blast for sure. I love where this conversation went today. Dualistic Unity Raw is always so much fun. If anybody would like to join us in 15 minutes, we're going to be on an hour-long Tier 1 call on Patreon. You can use a 7-day free trial, or it's only $5 a month. And of course, we appreciate the support. Patreon.com/Dualistic Unity. Otherwise, we will be back tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern time, on Twitch and YouTube Live for our regular call-in show, which is always a blast. I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much, everyone.